Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Siobhan Vipond, and I'm the Executive Vice President of the Canadian Labour Congress, and it's my pleasure to start off our session today. I want to start by recognizing the traditional owners of the land on which we gather and pay my respects to elders past, current, and emerging. And today's forum, of course, is the Climate and Just Transition Forum. The climate crisis now affects every part of the world of work. Climate impacts, include the heat waves that are killing workers on the job, and that is a huge concern, I think, to all of us. And then there's this opportunity in front of us about the clean energy transition that could bring good new jobs. Unions are organizing and mobilizing in areas we have never thought of before. And the change is here for workers in every sector, in every country. Climate scientists tell us that the time to act on climate change is now. Time is running out if we are to effectively stop the climate change from reaching tipping points that cannot be reversed. We know that unions must be at the table to ensure that the transitions we all face deliver for workers and their families in every workplace, in every country, in every industry. And we know that our work is urgent. The trade union movement is rising to the challenge of climate. We are engaged and acted on the shop floor, at the bargaining table, in national policy dialogue, and governments and the United Nations, advocating for workers and our concerns on all climate and employment plans. Union trustees are pushing for investments so that their workers' capital are held in pension funds into creating good, quality union jobs. Just Transition, agreed in the ILO and included in the UN Paris Agreement, is now seen everywhere as a critical part of fighting climate change. Climate action must take into account decent work, quality jobs, and social protection, be based on social dialogue with trade unions at the table. This is now understood to mean that nobody should be left behind in the transition to a carbon-neutral society. At this forum, we will hear success stories from trade unions from all around the world. We will hear from unions about their work in driving just transition from local to global to across sectors. Trade unions are making sure that new carbon-neutral jobs are good jobs with workers' rights respected, and the employers and governments support investment on climate-proofing employment, supporting skills training, deployment, and other measures to deliver justice for vulnerable workers and communities. In Canada, we have been fighting for workplace rights and are finally close to winning a new federal law that would ensure that workers are at the table, sector by sector, region by region, and workplace by workplace, so that no decision on responding to the climate crisis is made without workers. We are fighting to ensure that government climate investments deliver on the good jobs, on good union jobs that support families and communities and make sure that no worker is left behind. We are fighting to ensure that when employers in high-emitting sectors decarbonize their operations, that they bring their workers and their collective agreements with them. We are fighting to ensure that retraining and upskilling is delivered by accredited institutions and union training centers so that workers are prepared to meet the needs of a decarbonized Canadian economy. Because getting just transition right is a top priority for us at the Canadian Labour Congress and our affiliates, and the government knows it, and so we are pushing it, and they are listening. I am quite honored that we are going to have this discussion, starting with I guess at this moment, is it two general secretaries? So I first want to start with Sharon, because you have been a tireless champion in our movement, on climate change and just transitions issues, and many other ways. And so thank you on behalf. And so we would like to hear, in this work, in 12 years as General Secretary, what are you most proud of?
Well, thank you, Siobhan. Thank you, Siobhan, and indeed I'm very much looking forward to handing over the mantle of the General Secretary tomorrow to what is indeed a partnership and has been for a long time. But let me say that I think what I'm proudest of is that the Labor movement, in the vast majority, understands that the climate science is real, that the transition is inevitable, that we actually can't avoid it. We may disagree still on timeframes because in many vulnerable sectors, particularly fossil fuels, workers are still frightened about what the plan is. But I think the just transition narrative that was endorsed 15 years ago, really, or more, by well, actually more than that, by the first ICFTU and then the ITUC, has become a narrative that's framed ambition for working people. And while people are still working out what it means in their communities, in their workplaces, indeed around key sectors and industries, nevertheless it's a rallying cry to be exactly where you said, Siobhan, at the table. When we used to talk about just transition, people were very sceptical, and workers rightfully used to say, I think a few still do, that it's never actually been just. They've never had a transition that was just, so why would this one be different? But I think it is also about the challenge of fighting for just that you don't leave people behind. And you're talking now about an environment where you can fight for legislation because just transition is no longer a concept, it's actually a household or table discussion, often out of frustration as well as out of ambition. But where the Canadian Labor movement is now, and where many other movements are, it's about, government committees or commissions or indeed legislation that does see that workers are at the table and have a voice. So I think you'd have to say, number one, we have established just transition. It's been our campaign. We had allies who supported us. In fact, our very own Sam Smith, who's now head of the Just Transition Centre, was a spokesperson for WWF, and Kumi Naidoo, who was at that time head of Greenpeace, but is indeed now returned to his own base as an activist in South Africa. They were our allies who helped us deliver this. So there's a lot of lessons in how we got there, but it is a trade union concept, it was a trade union fight, and now it's a trade union reality trying to deliver it. But there are two other things. The capacity of the trade union movement. I'm really excited when I see, I don't know how many were there, Bert, but led by Bert at the recent climate conference, COP26, there would have been 100 trade unionists easily, and they're technically skilled negotiators. They go into the areas where you're fighting on things like loss and damage, about operationalising just transition, both in the response measures but beyond. So in the climate rule book, as well as in the political arena, where you're fighting for concepts and then you're fighting for details, our movement has some really skilled, knowledgeable people. And the third thing is, I guess, that employers and governments know we're coming. They actually know we're coming now, because it's not an alien concept they can just dismiss. It is actually a concrete set of demands. And I'm sure Luca will talk about this, but the European trade union movement gave us an even stronger base when they negotiated that as a foundation of the Green Deal, that the just transition was one of the pillars alongside the social pillar of rights, and that meant people were absolutely helm. So I'd simply finish by saying that from my perspective, we've won the argument, we now have to win the implementation. And if workers are not at the table at every level, workplace, sector, governments, industry structures, then we won't win it. And what we do need is now to see legislation and statutory institutions that guarantee that. And that's what you're fighting for in Canada.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And it is a good reminder that this language around just transition is because of the work that you and the trade unions have done in quite recent history, and we can't forget that and keep driving that home. So thank you. So Luca, congratulations on your impending inauguration, I guess. And I know Canada's unions are really looking forward to working with you in the future. And so for this session, coming out of this Congress, it's very clear that climate change is at the top of a priority list, and that just transition for workers is a huge priority for this entire movement. So what do you see as the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenges in this area of work over the next 4 years?
Well, I would like to start saying that I'm pretty much in line with what Sharon just said, and also to congratulate Sharon, the Just Transition Center, all the colleagues in the ITUC, because over the last few years, an incredible work was implemented and was delivered, and if now Just Transition is at the core of the trade union strategies, is first of all due to this woman and to her team. I think this is something that has really to be recognized, not only in terms of narrative, of slogans on political awareness, it's also in terms of action, because what the colleagues in the ITUC have been doing over the last few years has been an impressive work. And as I said, I'm pretty much in line with Sharon, because I think the sentence, we have won the argument, we have to win the implementation, is exactly where we are. I think there are important opportunities, not only one, many of them. First of all, the fact that there is awareness in the movement and willingness also to engage for just transition among all our colleagues all over the world in the different countries. Everybody understands that there are no jobs on a dead planet, and that it's important to have trade unions on board, trade unions at the table, and trade unions engage in processes. But it's also true that this increasing awareness is not only for the trade unions or for workers, it's also, finally, and fortunately, something that has spread around among institutions, politicians, businessmen and women. So there is a good mood, a good environment, I would say, a good context that can enable all of us to manage this just transition properly. And third opportunity I will see is that we have the technology in place that can help us in making sure that we can create so many green jobs and green businesses and replace the ones that don't work any longer. Having said that, of course, there are also challenges, as you rightly pointed out. And I would like just to emphasize two of them. The first one is that, and this is very contingental to some extent, but very dangerous, is the fact that because of the war in Ukraine, because of the energy prices crisis we are facing, because of inflation, etc., there is unfortunately a tendency, a temptation, I would say, among many institutions, politicians, businesses, but maybe also some of us, to say, in front of this emergency, we cannot go on any longer with our old targets, with our old approach. We need to come back a bit, to some kind of transitional solutions, temporary arrangements, and flexibility. Of course, some flexibility is needed, but we will make an enormous mistake if we will drop the targets we are aiming at, and if we will drop the policies that we have implemented so far to make sure that we can really deliver on a proper just transition. And the second challenge or danger that I see is that while there is total awareness about the need to change the policy and to manage the climate transition properly, there is not yet enough awareness about the fact that this transition will work only if it's social and if workers are on board. So while the concept of transition is there, the concept of just transition is not there for everybody. And this is the real challenge for the trade union movement, making sure that we can explain what just transition means. As I said in my speech yesterday, it's not only about a bit of training or social protection. Of course, training and social protection are essential, are accompanying measures, but without massive investment, massive job creation and industrial policies and social dialogue and governance in place where trade unions and workers are on board, we cannot succeed in delivering in this incredible challenge that we have in front of us. So having trade unions at the table, but also empowering the capacity of trade unions to be skilled and aware on what has to be done to implement a just transition, I think, is the key issue we have to concentrate on for the future.
Thank you very much. I want to thank both of you. I mean, Sharon, thank you so much for your remarks, but your leadership on just transition and this climate. I mean, the Just Transition Center has been instrumental, I know, for us in Canada to be able to, get the gains that we have because of the work that's being done. And I agree. I truly believe that there is no challenge that we cannot meet if workers are at the table and part of the solution. So thank you for that. And thank you, Luca, for being here and your comments. And we appreciate that the challenge in front of us, and we wish you the best of luck. But we will be there with you every step of the way. So thank you.
Thank you.
And so next, I'd like to welcome Ms. Losi, the president of CISATU, to lead us in the next session. CISATU has been a driving force in just transition in South Africa, and such a leader in our movement and the work that needs to be done. And so in addition to the moderating the next section, I believe you're going to share CISATU's story with us on just transition so that we can learn from you. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Siobhan, for that introduction. And as I greet everyone here today, my name is Zingiswa Losi. I'm the CISATU president in South Africa. And mine is to moderate the second session, which I will start by setting the scene as I call upon on stage the panelists that will be part of this session, expecting them to come up. In terms of the background and context in South Africa, the transition to a low-carbon economy cannot take place without workers and people at its center, as they are likely to be most affected by the transition and the impacts of climate change. Despite the rhetoric around a just transition to a low-carbon and climate-resilient economy, the unfortunate reality is that the planning and implementation of a just transition has been slow. Accelerating a just transition that centers the needs of workers requires that trade unions have the tools to negotiate for workers' demands with bargaining and policy structures. Without these tools, workers' and community demands and voices will be sidelined and excluded, resulting in an unjust outcomes. Now, CISATU has brought the term of a just transition into the debates on climate change and popularized its use in South Africa. This can mostly clearly be seen with CISATU's climate change policy framework, a foundation document for action on climate change and the precursor to a blueprint document. The framework outlined the impacts of climate change, its causes, the international politics of climate change, possible solutions, and a vision for a future economic and social systems that centers the working class in a low-carbon and climate-resilient economy. Importantly, it centers capitalism as the cause of the climate crisis, advocates for a holistic and transformative transition, and offers particular components of an end state captured in its 15 principles. Now, workers seek a vision of eco-socialism. This contrasts with the current capitalist economy. Eco-socialism requires a shift in how humans relate to one another. The capitalist system brings out the worst in people, and mainstream economics assumes self-interest and competition. Now, this alternative system entails mutual support, sharing, reciprocity, and cooperation. This form of eco-socialism supersedes previous conception of socialism, some of which have been criticized for being insufficient or insufficiently democratic. A new African eco-socialism can be democratic and participatory. This eco-socialist vision further incorporates feminist ideas which acknowledge unpaid care work and the social reproductive of the labor force by women, challenging the undervaluing of this largely unpaid and unrecognized work. Now, with the work that has been done in South Africa, we have managed to establish a presidential climate change commission. We have managed to have an ESCOM social compact. We have managed to have an embedding the transition in South Africa's national determined contributions and the development of the just transition blueprint for workers. Indeed, work still needs to be done, and COSATU recognizes the need for a gender transition that will prioritize women and young workers in the just transition. And in 2023, COSATU will launch a study to enhance the participation of women and young workers in a just transition. And allow me to then welcome our panelists. I will start with the president of ITUC and the president of Nigeria Labour Council, President Ayuba Waba, who will be talking to us on what our workers' demands around Nigeria's just transition in oil and gas, and what have been the wins and the challenges for workers. Over to you, President.
Thank you very much, Sister Lucy. For us in Nigeria, being a major oil-producing country, we have recognized that just transition of the workforce to green production platforms and creation of decent jobs are very critical and crucial, and therefore we have effectively prioritized the issue of just transition. Because just transition is important that as we transit to lower greenhouse emission, climate resilient development, and also environmental, and we need public support. And in all of this, we need to be at the driving seat where we'll be able to engage in policies, but importantly also that our voices need to be heard. Our collective efforts have remained how to drive a just transition that leaves no worker behind and throws no segment of the society under the bus. This aspiration to ensure that no worker is left behind has been the driving force behind our just transition engagement, which is the purpose of the global working class to the current essential threat of climate change. While prioritizing and mainstreaming just transition into our organizational effort, we took cognizance of the real gaps provided by the ILO framework, and those gaps are very, very important. There are 11, but I think for a start, we started actually with 5. These 5 are very, very important, and we have seen the importance of those 5 real gaps in actually assisting us in arriving at where we are. First is that we insisted that for any meaningful discussion on just transition, that unions need to be on the table to discuss just transition, because we need to protect our interests. And in doing that, we're able to win. And we insisted that mainstreaming just transition should anchor on social dialogue, and trade unions need to be on the table. And critically, we're able to do that. And that led to an act of parliament where we now have the National Commission for Climate Change. And as a result of that engagement that we are on the table, we have also a National Steering Committee. And on the National Steering Committee, NLC is actually represented. We represent the entire workforce, and also we represent the unions. And we have been able to discuss, and we have been able to reach some understanding. One, our government were committed to the issue of making sure that, one, the issue of skilling and reskilling becomes something that is part of the policy, that as we transit, we need workers to be trained on new energies that can actually transit to greener energy. And in doing that, we also thought that as major oil producing country, we need to transit to other forms of energy. And in doing that, we have gotten this concession. First is the issue of converting our vehicles into compressed natural gas. Because before now, all our vehicles are either using petrol or diesel. And therefore, we agree that government must have 2-year timeline to actually develop and also skill up our workers that they can be able to convert existing vehicle to use either compressed natural gas or liquefied natural gas. So that process is going on. And not only that, we said also that we should be able to empower rural and agri-economy so that in doing that, our workers in the rural areas will not also be left behind. And importantly, we got some concession where there is a commitment by government to actually deploy technology and research. In deploying technology and research, we are of the view that once we develop technology and research, we will be able to also address the issue of skill gaps, and importantly also we'll be able to skill our workers in the oil and gas, and they should be aware of the fact that in transiting, their jobs will not only be lost, we'll be able to create green jobs, and therefore will also be able to pay their benefits, importantly the benefits that accrue to those workers, and therefore workers will not actually be thrown out. But one thing that is important is also the consciousness that we have created among the oil and gas workers. One of our very important affiliates in this sector is the National Union of Petroleum and Gas Workers. We have created this very important awareness that they can be able to engage at secretarial level, and they should be able to negotiate, and they should be able to come out with some wins. And for us, that is very, very important, and we have been able to achieve all of this. So this is what we have been able to drive, because the consciousness has been created, and importantly, that we are engaging the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Ayuba. And our next panelist is President Liz Schuler, President of AFL-CIO, and President, if you can please briefly take us through the National Offshore Wind Agreement with Ørsted, or Inflation Reduction Act, and what have been the wins and the biggest challenges for workers in the US?
Thank you, President Losi. It is a win, but I wanted to start with some context in the US, because I think there's a perception that a lot of the clean energy jobs are union jobs, and that is not the case, which has made it a journey for us in the United States labor movement, because we had a lot of members working in fossil fuel industries with very high wages, good benefits, and highly unionized. So it became this debate over good jobs versus bad jobs. And we are just now getting to the point where we can start tangibly showing that the clean energy future runs right through the labor movement. Mm-hmm. That it cannot happen, as Lucas said, without the labor movement on board, at the table, and creating the future that we want to see. And so I think about the term just transition, as Sharon was saying. It was really a bad phrase for us because we had the offshoring of manufacturing jobs in the 90s that created communities that had been abandoned, and we did not manage that transition well. So now we look to the energy sector and electricity, and people don't have a trust. And we don't have sectoral bargaining in the United States. We have hostile employers who absolutely will avoid working with unions at every turn. And our labor law is broken. So it's very difficult to organize on a level playing field these new and emerging jobs. So I just wanted to set that as a baseline because it's been very, very difficult to get the employers to come to the table. And when we looked at the offshore wind industry, we looked at it as an opportunity to look forward. And we know that many of the companies who are developing on the East Coast of the United States are Nordic companies who have high road, high wage standards in their home countries. But when they come to the United States, they hire US management and they're very anti-union. So we were able to work cooperatively with our partners, in this instance in Denmark, to get to the table with FH, and thank you Lisette Risgaard, who has been a tremendous partner, to get to the table with the employer in Denmark, Ørsted, and to commit to a high road strategy in the US. And it really took quite a long time because it was a combination of many years, I would say 3 years. It took for us to really lay the foundation to get to what we now have is a memorandum of understanding and a national offshore wind agreement with 14 unions in the construction sector of the United States. It'll be 80,000 offshore wind jobs that will be high road, high wage. So it's a very excellent example of what we can do in partnership to work with countries and their unions to create a model. So now all of Ørsted's project to install wind turbines up and down the East Coast will create good union jobs. That's right. And just in my last minute, I think the things to highlight that are important about this offshore wind agreement is it is a commitment to a partnership with the unions, but it also is prioritizing equity, particularly in communities that have been left behind, that now we can use this as an opportunity for investment to bring in more women, more people of color who traditionally have not had access to the high-wage jobs in the energy sector. And so we look at it as a win-win for our country and also for the labor movement to bring in workers into our movement and create opportunity for those who haven't had it in the past. And we think it will be just the beginning because this was for the construction industry, that now we have a model to then take it to the rest of the supply chain. And so when we look at manufacturing, for example, of solar panels, which is entirely non-union, we don't have a domestic source, that we can actually take this example and apply it to other areas of the clean energy economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Liz. Our next speaker will be President Eli Siliban from Indonesia. President, kindly explain your experience in Indonesia of government setting climate change targets with no plans for workers and no tripartite JT body yet. Also talk to some of the gains from social protection from your country.
Thank you. Let me start to briefly tell you about Indonesian perspective and situation right now. Indonesia is list of country of biggest contribution and also the biggest shipping coal mining in the world. It is category of climate abstain, ranking 57 2021 and worsening drop to number 70 for 2022. As to responded, since COP21 committed ambitiously to reduce 29% with self-effort and even 41% with international support. It is clearly defined through country policy, name and disease 2030. It is now at second phase 2020 and until 2025. Indonesia also strongly committed at Poland COP25 A substantive on Paris Agreement, cooperation of all parties in effort to strengthen education, training, public participation, and public access to information on climate change. But we see it's not really done in field. And another thing also, we didn't see yet the willingness of trade union to aware about this issue. So when we try to bring to the table, not all the unions support us about this, but we try our best, and then we establish networking, and also we asking government to see us, and also to asking our idea how we see the future about this. And what is Indonesia response, a trade union response about this? We see that it's quite less concrete action on just transition, nationally determined contribution, and long-term strategy, low carbon climate resilience mentioned only, no detailed action, no target or program. On energy, government roadmap is strong enough for economic and environment, but not on social aspect, no roadmap on employment. Unfortunately, Department of Labor is absent on technical reasons, such as no budget, no program, while 1.2 million workers will lose their job and million workers from other sectors linked to it, like services, education, even manufacture that using coal in their production. Now worker demands, we listening, we asking them, and this they propose to government to establish or form tripartite committee on just transition, the independent one to advocate the pace call out, but also to be ready for other sector of transition. This is ideal social dialogue mechanism to oversee the process. We asking government to make an employment roadmap comprehensively package of energy transition. It is cover data of company closure, who is first and what is transition. How about social protection scheme and even potential 50 million job creation? Government provide workers with retraining, redeployment opportunities, and skill development. This is our demand. Also, guarantees the access to the human right to social protection, promote social justice, striving for poverty eradication and social inclusion, release on social dialogue between government, employers, and workers. For your information, during Labor Employment Ministerial meeting, Business 20 and Labor 20 also submitted joint statements stressed that accelerate the just transition toward environmentally sustainable economies and societies, including national strategies and industrial policies for job creation, business development and support, skill development and social protection. Labor Indonesia and also business try to implementing this for next year. Just transition, women and social security. Even though the issue of gender integration and climate change has been included in several international documents, such as the Paris Agreement, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and other efforts are needed to ensure the realization of women resilient to climate change. Even women are unable to recognize the social impact of climate change and how to respond to the risk faced by the most vulnerable. As women, we also want to be involved in the design, implementation, and measurement of climate strategies. Need to support for women to learn the skill they need to respond to the impact of the climate crisis and protecting women in public forums so women can confidently and safely speak out about climate change. Thank you for giving me more time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, President Eli. The next speaker is the General Secretary of UGT, General Secretary Pepe Alvarez. Can you provide the context on the Just Transition Agreement for the power sector, Just Transition Institute on Government, and also what have been the biggest challenges that you have had?
Buenas tardes. Muchísimas gracias por invitarme a participar en este panel. Quiero, en primer lugar, situar de manera clara e inequívoca que el cambio climático es una realidad hoy. Es una realidad en todo el planeta. No hay fronteras posibles que impidan que el cambio climático esté afectando a la vez a todo el planeta. Por eso, desde las organizaciones sindicales, desde la Confederación Sindical Internacional, tenemos que ser conscientes que este es un reto que tenemos que abordar. No hay opción, no hay ninguna posibilidad de que no tengamos que abordar ese reto. Pero también hay que decir claramente que no se puede abordar de una manera impuesta, que no se puede abordar desde una perspectiva unilateral, que se necesita una mayoría social, se necesita la complicidad, el trabajo, el convencimiento de las trabajadoras y de los trabajadores y de los legítimos representantes de los trabajadores y de las trabajadoras de las organizaciones sindicales. Estas son cuestiones que tienen que tenerse en cuenta en el conjunto del planeta a la hora de abordar los cambios derivados de la descarbonización, los cambios derivados del cambio climático que estamos padeciendo. No es fácil, no es sencillo abordar desde la perspectiva laboral, desde la perspectiva económica, los cambios. Nosotros en España hemos hecho un proceso largo en el tiempo, con diferentes acuerdos. Ahora estamos en la última fase de esta ronda, que tiene que ver sobre todo con la descarbonización en el sector de la automoción. Para nosotros es un sector importantísimo. Primero lo hemos hecho con el carbón. El proceso de descarbonización ha sido un proceso muy complejo porque, efectivamente, como antes Schuller decía, se destruyen puestos de trabajo de una gran calidad y los puestos de trabajo que los sustituyen, en principio, no son de la misma calidad. Y en ese sentido, la otra problemática es que no se suelen crear los puestos de trabajo geográficamente en el mismo lugar que se destruyen, y eso también complica de manera extraordinaria las soluciones. En nuestro caso, en algunas cuencas mineras hemos conseguido efectivamente que las personas que estaban trabajando tuvieran una solución personal, pero ha sido mucho más difícil el poder crear trabajo, desarrollo, industrias alternativas, y hay algunas de estas zonas que los trabajadores y las trabajadoras han emigrado de manera muy importante. Por eso creo que estos procesos es muy difícil pensar que la transición es justa. Podemos intentar hacer lo que sea lo más justa posible, pero es muy difícil que nadie se quede en el camino. Y los nuevos sectores a construir son sectores que, como ocurre siempre, son débiles desde el punto de vista sindical. Las empresas intentan aprovechar al máximo a los trabajadores y a las trabajadoras de esos sectores. Por eso es mucho más difícil el poder llegar a unas condiciones contractuales similares a las que tenían los viejos sectores, donde la sindicación, la fuerza organizada de los trabajadores, les había llevado a tener posiciones muy importantes. De cualquier manera, creo sinceramente que para abordar estos procesos se necesita, en primer lugar, concertación, acuerdo y compromiso de las sociedades donde se va a producir esos ajustes industriales, formación. Es muy importante que las trabajadoras y los trabajadores en esas zonas donde se van a producir esas situaciones reciban formación y, finalmente, organización de los trabajadores y de las trabajadoras para poder asumir esas condiciones en el menor tiempo posible. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, General Secretary. Indeed, just transition, climate change knows no borders. The next speaker that we are going to have is from ITUC, Brazil, a Confederal Secretary on Climate and Environment, Comrade Daniel Gayo. Please take us through the climate and just transition agenda of the new government and what have been the biggest challenge.
Boa tarde, companheiras, boa tarde, companheiros. É um prazer compor essa mesa, uma mesa de muito trabalho de alguns anos, trabalhos muitas vezes individuais nos nossos países, mas também trabalhos coletivos, graças aos investimentos e à dedicação que o Centro de Transição Justa e a CSI têm colocado e a centralidade que tem dado a esse tema. Nós, na CUT, tivemos o prazer de poder contar com esse apoio, com esse suporte, para organizar uma série de disputas que foram muito importantes nesse período. Foram 6 anos de muito ataque da extrema-direita e do capitalismo aos trabalhadores no Brasil. E a vitória de Lula é um tremendo golpe na extrema-direita. É uma vitória muito importante e que começa a dar resposta a esses ataques que viemos sofrendo nesses 6 anos, principalmente aos direitos trabalhistas, mas também, e muito significativamente do ponto de vista internacional, aos direitos e às políticas ambientais. A campanha do Lula, graças ao trabalho que nós viemos desenvolvendo dentro da CUT, já apontou com centralidade, e o seu programa de governo também traz isso, questões importantes dessas duas agendas, da agenda trabalhista e da agenda ambiental, e conexões dessas agendas. Ou seja, nós já estamos tratando de colocar a transição justa nos marcos do programa do governo Lula, que assume em 1º de janeiro de 2023. E graças à participação da CUT nesse programa eleitoral, a transição justa já é pauta do programa de transição. Foi pauta, inclusive, da presença do Lula na Conferência do Clima, agora em Sharm el-Sheikh, no Egito, onde, além de ser extremamente saudado, e o povo que ali estava, inclusive, gritou isso, é muito significativo para nós. O Brasil voltou, ou seja, o Brasil voltou para as negociações do clima e o Brasil é determinante nesse processo de negociação. Para nós, o Brasil também voltou a discutir com o seu povo, a discutir direitos e a ter diálogo social. E é essa a nossa luta. Outro logro, outras conquistas desse período, esse período de resistência, foi que, graças também a esse trabalho que estamos fazendo no Brasil, conseguimos iniciar com o parlamento, e trata-se de um parlamento extremamente conservador, mas que, mesmo sendo conservador, ainda conseguimos abrir espaços de diálogo e, em conferências dentro do Senado Federal, conseguimos começar a construir os novos marcos legais para as energias eólicas offshore e para o hidrogênio verde, que são duas áreas onde se desenham vários investimentos para o futuro do Brasil. Para além dessas áreas, outras áreas no setor de transmissão e no setor de geração. E para nós agora é importante entender quais são os principais desafios nesse governo. Para além de disputar por dentro do governo e para disputar na perspectiva da transição justa com o diálogo social, através das conferências que esse governo se propõe a fazer, nós, inclusive, já propomos ao governo de transição do presidente Lula que organize, para além das várias conferências já previstas, como Conferência do Trabalho, Conferência da Saúde, Conferência da Educação, Conferência das Mulheres, que organize também uma conferência nacional, precedida de regionais e estaduais, no setor de energia. E também uma conferência de políticas internacionais. E aí, para tratar, por último, dos 2 grandes desafios, os 2 caminhos principais para discutir transição justa, eu vou citar, nesse momento, apenas 2. O Brasil hoje emite 46% das emissões de gases de efeito estufa brasileiras são graças às mudanças de uso da terra, são por culpa do desmatamento. 46% das emissões de gases são desmatamento. Então, essa é uma ação central do governo Lula, e certamente será. Mas nós temos que lembrar, como sindicalistas, que ali naquele espaço, na Amazônia e nessas regiões de conflito, há trabalhadores, há pessoas que se sustentam, infelizmente, inclusive por conta dessas atividades ilegais. E também há diversas comunidades atingidas por essas atividades ilegais. Então, nós temos que ter um olhar para essas pessoas, mais do que, para além de combater o desmatamento, nós temos que olhar e oferecer oportunidade a essas pessoas. Então, disso também se tratará a transição justa no Brasil. Segundo e por último, um olhar muito organizado e criterioso para a transição energética, e com isso concluo. A transição energética justa é fundamental para o Brasil. O Nordeste brasileiro já tem vários investimentos e é previsto uma série de investimentos, inclusive nesses dois setores, nos próximos anos, da energia eólica offshore e da energia do hidrogênio verde, mas esses empregos, até então, são criados de forma muito fragmentada, com precarização, com terceirização e quarteirização e sem negociação salarial, com ataque aos sindicatos. Portanto, nós queremos retomar e com a construção, com esse diálogo com o governo Lula, queremos impor a essas empresas, a maioria estrangeiras, fruto da privatização de parte da Petrobras e da Eletrobras, esse novo diálogo e esse novo contrato social. Obrigado.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Now we're going to have from Germany, the president of DGB, President Yasmin Fahim. Please, tell us what kind of major changes on social and environmental aspects will the new law on due diligence bring, and how trade unions deal with it?
Thank you very much. Liebe Zingi, ich kann zunächst einmal sagen, dass wir die gleichen Herausforderungen sehen wie in den USA. Allerdings muss ich eingestehen, dass es oft so ist, dass die Deutschen zwar gute Ideen haben, aber ihr in den USA meistens schneller in der Umsetzung seid. Das ist im Moment gerade auch ein bisschen unser Problem. Denn viele, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, werden hier wissen, dass Deutschland eine Entscheidung getroffen hat, sowohl aus Kohle wie auch aus Atomenergie auszusteigen, nämlich jetzt im Jahr 2022 bzw. 38 für die Kohle. Unser Problem, das wir haben, ist allerdings, wer aussteigen will, muss auch in irgendetwas einsteigen. Und im Moment sind wir nicht schnell genug. Das heißt, wir müssen also mitten in dieser Krise die Transformation insbesondere im Energiesektor voranbringen. Das ist aber nicht nur eine allein technische Frage, sondern es ist eben auch eine soziale Frage, wie man eigentlich von A nach B kommt. Und deswegen will ich ein Beispiel hier kurz erläutern, das deutlich machen soll, dass wir diese Frage von Just Transition im Klimawandel nicht getrennt betrachten dürfen, als sozusagen separierte Debatten von Klimazielen auf der einen Seite und sozialen Aufgaben auf der anderen Seite, sondern dass uns eine intelligente Kombination einfallen muss, damit es erfolgreich ist. Und ich will kurz Bezug nehmen auf die Krisensituation, in der wir gerade stecken. Der energetische Umbau in Deutschland, das wird jetzt umso klarer, kann nicht gelingen, ohne dass wir nicht eine regelbasierte Lieferketten haben. Also solange die Lieferketten alleine kostengetrieben sind, wird uns auch in Deutschland nicht ein erfolgreicher Umbau im Energiesektor gelingen, der zugleich sozial gute, abgesicherte Arbeitsplätze schafft. Und das ist, glaube ich, etwas, was viele gerade beschäftigt, dass sichtbar wird, dass die Lieferketten verletzlich sind, dass damit unsere gesamte ökonomische Basis verletzlich ist. Und es trifft uns eben mitten im energetischen Umbau. Und als Gewerkschaften wollen wir aber den Impuls setzen, zu sagen, Transformation, gerade auch in Krisenzeiten, kann nur gelingen, wenn sie auf dem Auge der sozialen Nachhaltigkeit nicht blind bleibt. Also, das heißt, eine Beteiligung von Arbeitnehmern ist Voraussetzung für eine nachhaltige Wirtschaft. Wir haben in zahlreichen Studien Jahr für Jahr das nachgewiesen und wir erleben es auch im Energiesektor. Wir haben beispielsweise den letzten Hersteller von Windkraftanlagen in Deutschland verloren, der über viele Jahre hinweg in Deutschland subventioniert worden ist, aber seine Gewinne in China investiert hat und jetzt den Standort in Deutschland geschlossen hat. Das ist nicht besonders klug. Das heißt, was wir erreichen wollen, ist, mit einem Lieferkettengesetz Sicherheiten für uns zu schaffen, durch stabile, verlässliche Lieferketten, aber natürlich auch damit, eben nicht nur unsere Wirtschaft zu stabilisieren, sondern auch quasi ein neues Band der Solidarität weltweit zu knüpfen. Denn ansonsten werden wir immer wieder nur in diesen kostengetriebenen Wettbewerb reingedrängt werden. Und deswegen ist es sehr spannend, glaube ich, sich das deutsche Lieferkettengesetz anzuschauen, das wir verabschiedet haben. Es hat vor allem auch im Fokus die Sicherung der Menschenrechte in den globalen Wertschöpfungsketten. Es tritt im Januar nächsten Jahres in Kraft und soll von den Rohstoffen bis zu den Endprodukten gelten. Dabei geht es darum, wirtschaftliche, soziale und kulturelle Rechte zu sichern, aber eben auch umweltbezogene Menschenrechte und Mindeststandards. Es geht darum, dass zukünftig jedes Unternehmen präventiv ein Risikomanagement und eine Risikoanalyse vorweisen muss, Präventionsmaßnahmen aufsetzen muss und gegebenenfalls seine Beschaffungsstrategien ändern muss, wenn sie bestimmte Kriterien nicht einhalten. Das Besondere ist, dass die Betriebsräte in den deutschen Unternehmen größere Beteiligungsrechte bekommen. Sie sollen nämlich einbezogen werden, die Arbeitsbedingungen nicht nur vor Ort, sondern in den globalen Wertschöpfungsketten mit thematisieren zu können. Und ich glaube, das ist für uns eine Riesenchance, eben den Kostenwettbewerb für deutsche Unternehmen in Zukunft eher runterzuholen und gleichzeitig die sozialen und Umweltstandards eben insgesamt zu verbessern. Es gibt ähnliche Gesetze in Frankreich und Niederlande, aber das deutsche Lieferkettengesetz schafft eben jetzt nochmal einen sehr starken Impuls für eine europäische Richtlinie. Auf europäischer Ebene wird jetzt genau aufgrund dieses Gesetzes weiter verhandelt, wie eben tatsächlich die EU insgesamt eine kluge Verschmelzung schaffen kann von sozialen und ökologischer Verantwortlichkeit, sodass wir stabile Wertschöpfungsketten schaffen. Denn es geht am Ende um nichts weniger als einen regelbasierten Multilateralismus, der aber zur Voraussetzung hat, dass eben soziale und ökologische Aspekte miteinander verbunden sind und nur so am Ende des Tages uns eine Transformation gelingen kann, die eben auch zum Beispiel und zukünftig Windkrafthersteller in Deutschland sichert.
Thank you very much, President Yasmin. And I want to take this opportunity and thank all our panelists for the great input that you have made. I think we have learned a lot on cooperations with workers and that there is no just transition if it leaves workers behind, if it leaves women and youth, if it leaves community behind. So I want to say thank you very much, and you are excused. And as they leave the stage, the next session that we'll be having would be a session on the Dorje Kadri Award that will be done by the General Secretary, Comrade Sharon, and Teresa. I'm not sure, Comrade Sharon, if Comrade Teresa is here. Oh, okay. Sure. How are you?
I'm really good. How are you?
I'm good. Congratulations. Thank you for the congrats. You will hear with the award.
Okay, do I have a partner in crime? Is Therese here? Oh, excellent. So this is something that's an incredible honour for me. The Dorje Kadri Award is an annual award that we give, to an affiliate who has done outstanding work around the climate transition, and particularly where we can see a move to just transition that gives us great heart. Let me just tell you for 1 minute who Dorje Khatri was. He was the leader of the Nepali Sherpa Union. He walked the mountains, guided people up Mount Everest, amongst other magnificent peaks in Nepal, on a regular basis. But he was a trade union leader, so proud. And one day he actually contacted us and he said, Sharon, I'd like to take the ITUC flag to the top of Mount Everest. And I thought, wow, that's a feat. But he did. He planted our flag at the top of Mount Everest, not just because it was a climbing achievement, but because it was a symbol of us absolutely going to the extents we needed to go to protect the planet. And that trade unionists had a fight, a part of this fight. And he was proud to be part of it. I always get very emotional about this because he then gave us the medal that he got from going to the top of Mount Everest. And today it sits in the ITUC office and is in fact, Owen's just become the custodian of it because I'm standing down, but it is in fact replicated here. And sadly, very sadly, this incredible man who came to give us not just a medal, but a piece of the rock, piece of soil from Mount Everest as a symbol of his commitment to the global union movement and the fight for climate justice. He actually died in those horrible avalanches. And so we've lost Dorje, but his spirit lives on. And Therese, I know you'll tell the colleagues more about this, but you know, when we formed the Just Transition Centre, and Karl Petter was very committed to the industrial transition, he and I, in fact, were very unhappy when I sat on the new Climate Economy Commission. It was a magnificent report about growth, a new growth model, and it had just transition referenced in it, amongst other things, shared intellectual property, for example. But we lost a detailed account of industry and industry transition, and it was in this other box. And then we kept arguing the point, and ultimately there was a commission that grew out of a fossil fuels commission, so we didn't join it. But it came up with the slogan, Mission Possible, that you could transform the industrial sector of our economy. And of course, that's where all our jobs are. And so then Karl championed this. You had, your union was, your federation was already supporting your industrial workers to do some of that thinking. But we had this magnificent Just Transition Centre discussion with indeed the employer, the government, and indeed the workers, of course, but also some guests from around the world. We had a US brother, amongst others. And that for us was the start of it being a really possible thing, really something you could see. And with steel, clean steel production, I know and you know that this is a possibility for a real just transition, because there are more jobs in the hydrogen end, if you get it right and get the skilling right, than you will lose in the process. So for your dedication as a federation and the unions involved, and for my friend and brother Karl Petter, then I'm proud to award you the Dorje Khatri Award.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have a video from Karl?
I think so. No?
Oh, we do.
First of all, hello, Congress. I would really love to see you in Melbourne, but I didn't have the possibility to go that far for just social reasons. But I hope you have a fantastic Congress. I was asked to talk a little bit about green steel or fossil-free steel and the development of that in Sweden, and I'm really proud to do it, both as an old president of LO and as a minister of the Swedish government. Actually, it started between the trade union and the company already 2017, when it was the time to make huge investment in a new blast furnace and a new cooking plant in the steel factory south of Sweden. It's a huge investment, and it's an investment for 50 to 70 years. And we had discussion between trade union and the company. Is it really wise to invest so much money in an old technique to reduce steel or pellets with coal to make steel? And actually, then they decided to see, can we do it in another way? And in just a few years, they developed a technique to reduce oxygen out of iron ore with hydrogen, starting the project Hybrid together with the electricity company and the mining industry. And already now, actually, they presented the first steel, they sold the first steel, and the order books for fossil-free steel is huge. So many have asked, why was the trade union so in favor of this in Sweden? Actually, it was of two reasons. First of all, this creates new, secure jobs for a long time in Sweden. And secondly, it's also very, very much better work conditions. The work environment become much better when you reduce coal from the process of making steel. So for the company, of course, as always, they have much higher profit. And for trade union, secure new jobs in a sector without carbon dioxide emissions. And for all of us, this is one of the biggest emissions of carbon dioxide worldwide. So for the world, if we do fossil-free steel all around the world, it will save us some 7% of all carbon footprint in the atmosphere. And for Sweden, it's actually 12%. So now we're working with this for 5 years. And now the companies in Sweden decided to invest in 3 new steel mills the coming 8 years. It's not very often when they open new steel mills in the world. So we have now 3 new steel mills into 2030. It creates about 10,000 new jobs. They are green, they are fossil-free, and they will become much more secure than if you were using coal. And the world save about 7% of all carbon emissions. So if you want to see a really win-win-win project, go to see fossil-free making of steel in Sweden. And good luck with the Congress, and good luck all of you to reduce carbon dioxide in your processes, and we can be a much better country and much better world in the future. And remember what Sharon always say, there are no jobs on a dead planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's an honor, of course, to receive this prize. I will not hold, Carl-Petter held the best speech. And like you heard, jobs will disappear, jobs will change, but a lot of new, good jobs will also be created. And I would like to say thank you from LO Sweden, but we also want to share this with ITUC and with the affiliates that fight for workers, for jobs, for good jobs, and better lives. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Secretary Sharon and Comrade Teresa, and congratulations. In this next session, we're going to have interventions, which will be from the floor, already identified 4 speakers. You will have not more than 5 minutes to make your intervention, and may I call to the mic that is close to you, the President of Nezaviston, my apologies if I pronounce it wrong, Shendaga Andrich, who will make an intervention on just transition and trade union involvement in Serbia.
From here or there?
You, right there. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Well,
I would like to say, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. When it comes to the just transition issues in Serbia, I have to say, due to current crisis, that focus is a little bit moved to the energy security and diversification of the energy resources. This is something that is actually imposed due to the fact of the current crisis. But just transition is on the agenda, and we as the trade unions, we're not very much invited on this discussion, but we've been imposed ourselves to be a part of the discussion. And in order to do so, we invest a lot in our knowledge, in developing of our skills, and thanks to the different programs that we have with the Solidarity Center of IFL-CIO in the program that we conduct on health and safety. But also we are planning to negotiate new decent work country program with the ILO for the next 4 years, and just transition will be part of that. Also, I would like to say that one of the most vulnerable sectors on this issue in Serbia is mining and energy, and this is where the most pollution is coming in almost 70% of all negative effects within the industry. It's a not huge percentage of workforce there, but still we would like to have an agenda reskilling and investment in human resources, because we think unless we are on the agenda regarding the just transition, it will be only transition without just prefix. So we are hitting this topic in all our debates in a sense that it should be done through the social dialogue, it should be done in cooperation with trade unions, academics, NGOs, it should be done in a way that health and safety is also involved in this discussion, because not all jobs in economy means that those jobs are safe and healthy for the workers. So we are doing a lot in putting this union position in this agenda, and recently in October we had a national debate on this. We participated together with our colleagues from other trade union confederation, CATUS, and we will develop joint position on those issues, having in mind that we also participate in the work of the Social and Economic Council of Serbia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next intervention, we will get it from Gloria Pavesi on behalf of CGIL, CISL, and UIL Italy. And the intervention will be on joint platforms: a just transition for work, personal well-being, social justice, and the protection of the planet for a green transition of the economy. Gloria.
Grazie e un saluto a tutti. È diventato ormai evidente che il cambiamento climatico è un evento che sta già coinvolgendo il pianeta e con esso la società, l'economia, il lavoro, la politica, il modo in cui viviamo e la nostra salute. Si sta verificando più rapidamente di quanto avevamo previsto ed è fortemente influenzato, o quantomeno in gran parte accelerato, dalle scelte e dal comportamento umano. È una minaccia globale potenzialmente reversibile e perciò non è più una questione rimandabile o secondaria. E l'assoluta urgenza di un'azione decisa di contenimento o di contrasto al cambiamento climatico è emersa anche nel documento congressuale qui discusso ed è stata raccolta e ribadita nella quasi totalità degli interventi e del dibattito. Su questo tema CGIL, CISL e UIL hanno già espresso da tempo le proprie richieste in un documento unitario risalente al 2019 e completato con un successivo documento, redatto alla luce degli impegni presi dai governi in relazione alle risorse destinate dall'Europa per rispondere alla crisi socio-economica ed ambientale aggravata dalla pandemia. Le proposte del documento hanno di fatto anticipato le indicazioni europee vincolate alle risorse stanziate per la crisi pandemica. Indicazioni che vedono come priorità gli investimenti nella transizione ecologica, nell'azione per il clima e nella tutela dell'ambiente e il passaggio verso un modello di sviluppo sostenibile. Il confronto che CGIL, CISL e UIL hanno avviato prevede un utilizzo dei fondi focalizzato su precisi punti, che vado ora sinteticamente ad illustrarvi. Il primo punto riguarda la mitigazione del cambiamento climatico e prevede investimenti rivolti all'efficientamento energetico e strutturale degli edifici, in particolar modo quelli pubblici come scuole ed ospedali, alla produzione, stoccaggio e utilizzo delle energie rinnovabili, alla mobilità sostenibile e alla promozione dell'educazione ambientale. Il secondo punto riguarda l'adattamento al cambiamento climatico. Le risorse in questo caso vanno indirizzate verso la messa in sicurezza del territorio per poter contare sulla prevenzione anziché gestire le emergenze, la tutela della biodiversità, il contrasto agli sprechi idrici, la rigenerazione urbana. Il terzo punto riguarda un uso sostenibile delle risorse idriche e gli investimenti sono volti al potenziamento e adeguamento degli acquedotti, all'utilizzo razionale delle acque, al potenziamento della mobilità fluviale e alla rimozione delle materie plastiche dai mari. Il quarto punto è relativo alla transizione verso l'economia circolare e prevede la riconversione ecologica dell'industria, rendere maggiormente efficiente la gestione dei rifiuti, una formazione permanente sull'economia circolare. Passo al quinto punto, che è focalizzato sulla prevenzione e controllo dell'inquinamento. E qui è necessario finanziare misure per combattere l'inquinamento dell'industria e dell'agricoltura e la tutela del suolo, delle acque e dell'aria mediante il controllo di emissioni e scarichi. Un ultimo punto, il sesto, riguarda la protezione e ripristino della biodiversità e degli ecosistemi e prevede di destinare gli investimenti alla decontaminazione e bonifica di aree di interesse regionale e alla tutela e ripristino degli ecosistemi. Torno ora, chiudendo la riflessione iniziale, l'uomo è in grado di influenzare il clima. Ogni transizione economica ha avuto una conseguenza diretta sull'ambiente. Le priorità che ci poniamo determinano le scelte che influenzano il nostro impatto sull'ambiente, quindi è nostro dovere ribadire questa consapevolezza, ribadire la nostra responsabilità e chiedere ai governi che le priorità cambino, soprattutto ora che il contesto lo richiede con urgenza. L'uomo è parte dell'ambiente, se non ha come priorità la preservazione dell'ambiente, non preserva se stesso. Grazie a tutti.
Thank you very much, Gloria. The next intervention will be coming from Randy Weingarten from the US, the President AFT and AFL-CIO on climate curriculum. Oh, not here. Okay. The last intervention is from Paul Novak, the General Secretary Designate of TUC. He will make an intervention on energy crisis and just transition in the UK. The GS, over to you.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the opportunity to say a few words about what's happening in the UK. It's clear, in common with many countries around the globe, that our climate crisis is inextricably linked with our energy crisis. In the UK, energy bills have doubled in 1 year alone, and that's despite the support that was introduced by the government. That support will end in April 2023. And those rising energy costs are having a disastrous impact on our members, their families and communities. According to our retail union, USDOR, 1 in 4 members are saying they won't be able to turn on the heating in their homes this winter. More broadly, 1 in 10 families are suffering from fuel poverty. And it is clear that employers are putting off investment decisions, are laying people off because they're not sure how much they'll be paying for energy next year. That makes a big difference in energy-intensive industries like steel. At the same time, we can see the impact of climate change in our country as well. More frequent flooding, abnormally high summer temperatures, and the government has signally failed over the last decade to develop the balanced mix of clean energy sources that we need to both help secure our energy supplies but also decarbonise our economy. So what can we do about all of that? There are 3 things I think should be our area of focus. First of all, it's very clear in the UK, our fragmented, privatised energy system has completely and utterly failed us. Energy producers are earning huge unearned profits, which the government has been reluctant to tax. At the same time, the UK taxpayer has spent £3 billion bailing out failed private energy retailers. So we're calling on the government to bring those energy retailers into public ownership. And we're pleased that the Labour Party in the United Kingdom has promised that the next Labour government will create a new publicly owned energy company to develop new green energy sources, generation capacity. Secondly, we think that the government should match its political rhetoric around net zero with some real hard cash. And that's not just in the long term, there are some short-term wins to be had there as well. For example, we believe that we could create 300,000 good new green jobs, retrofitting homes and schools with insulation. And we're calling for the government to make wider investment. We've set out an investment plan of £84 billion over 2 years for everything from green energy through to high-speed broadband. At the moment, the UK government has pledged just £12 billion. Final point, Chair. We're not just waiting for the government to take action on climate, we're taking action ourselves in workplaces with employers in both the public and the private sector, whether it's nuclear, automotive, the NHS, right across our economy, working to create good new green jobs, working with employers to transition to new technologies in a way that we're supporting our members and keeping them in employment, and working out how are we going to deliver public services in a green way. And that's the crucial point about the involvement of workers, the involvement of unions and securing a just transition. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Paul. And thank you very much. In that session, we need a gendered just transition that will prioritize women and young workers, that will be about the reskilling and upskilling of workers. And as I call upon the next moderator for the next session, Samantha Smith, a director of ITUC's Just Transition Center, who will be taking up the last session of this discussion. And Samantha.
Losi, can I just do an advertisement for Randy Weingarten's cause? And in fact, it's the Education International cause, because what she was going to do is ask all of you to support the campaign for mandatory climate education in our schools and in our business colleges and university courses. So I won't say anything more, but if we are going to educate a generation of young people who absolutely understand the imperative not just of climate action, but just transition, this is a fantastic campaign to be part of.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade President. Thank you, Comrade President. Thank you, Sharon. So my name is Sam Smith. I'm the director of the Just Transition Center at the ITUC. And we do what it says on the tin. We help our affiliates, we help unions around the world get good plans for just transition. And as you heard, this work on just transition, it really is an effort across our movement. In the 5 or 6 years that the Just Transition Center has been around, we've seen a huge change in our movement at all levels, where our members and workers who should be our members know the changes here. They know that they want social dialogue to negotiate that change, and they are ready to do that. So we have done a great job, a great collective job, mobilizing our movement, and we should be very excited about that. At the Just Transition Center, we're working with unions from Iraq to Indonesia, from New Zealand to Nigeria, north and south, all with this challenge of making sure that the new jobs are good jobs and that no worker is left behind. I won't say too much more about what we do, but I would really love now to call our General Secretary, outgoing General Secretary Sharon Burrow, to the stage, along with Peggy Hessen-Fungsvik, the President of LO Norway, and Atge Høie, the General Secretary of Industrial Global. So our three panelists, let's give them a little round of applause as they make their way to the stage. Our three panelists are going to tell us about a joint initiative between ITUC, LO Norway, and Industrial, where we looked at what just transition in the energy sector, and particularly in the oil and gas sector, would mean for workers. This has been a very exciting initiative involving hundreds of union presidents and senior staff from around the world, from the world's major oil and gas producing countries and beyond. It involved 10 workshops in all the languages across 6 months. So we also want to thank all of our members, our elected leaders who participated in this effort. And you're now going to hear a bit more about what we found out. So Sharon, I'd like to start with you, please, to get the background of this initiative. Could you tell us a little bit about why ITUC decided to embark on this collective work with LO Norway and with Industrial?
So, first of all, LO Norway, Peggy, and of course our dear departed Hans Christian, was in fact always thoughtful about the transition. And as a nation that is indeed has very little dependence actually on oil and gas and is almost entirely dependent on renewable energy, they nevertheless have a big export market and a lot of jobs in the industry and in the supply chains. So, Sam, I would say for, 10 years maybe, we've actually talked about what the impact would be, and it hasn't always been easy for LO to guide that path with, on the one hand, their members, like all of us, who are climate activists, and on the other hand, at-least members who are worried about the future. And then, of course, we're very lucky to have a to share an employee, Sam, with your Diana in the Just Transition Centre and your Diana in Industrial. And it just made sense that after we'd listened to workers who really are, they understand the intellectual imperative to shift, but they are frightened for the future. And when you brought the proposition to me to actually listen to our members and to try and bring together not just the narrative of Just Transition, but the recommendations about what it would take, it just made perfect sense. And indeed, it's a great model for not just this sector, but other sectors.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. And so just to say a couple of the things that we did, we heard from not only unions, but a few external experts about technologies that are supposed to help us decarbonize across the energy sector. We heard examples from countries, and we also had a fantastic session where we, again, worked together with our members, with our affiliates, to come up with some conclusions and recommendations. But please, Peggy, it would be great to hear from you about this process and also about LO Norway's journey on just transition.
Well, thank you, Sam. I think that climate change and inequality are two of the topics that has to be at the top of the trade union agenda, also globally. These are topics that unite us across borders and across generations, and these issues are also closely intertwined, and they need to be solved in international collaboration. We think that unions need to be at the center of shaping climate solutions to ensure good and decent jobs for all in a climate-friendly future. And as Sharon was saying, Norway is a major energy producer, one of the largest in Europe, with both oil and gas, but also hydropower. And we know that climate change will affect our labor market. It will change a lot of people's jobs and also their lives. Some might lose their job, and some might have to do something completely different in the future. But we also know that the clean energy transition will create new jobs, like we heard also from Carl Petter and from Sweden. Now, this has to be jobs that must be fair and just, and it's our responsibility to ensure a just transition that guarantees jobs. Now, I think there are several ways of doing this, and first of all, a just transition has to happen both on a company level and also on a societal level. So in our experience, there needs to be a close collaboration between workers, trade union representatives, and also the employers at the workplace to create the solutions that are needed for a green transition. And to achieve this, to have a say, unions need to be strong unions. We need to organize. That's the first and most important thing. Now, in Norway, we are lucky to have a political climate that is made up for a vibrant civil society, which allows for a range of voices to be heard. That is academia, political parties, environmental organizations, and the social partners in the world of work. We all contribute to, and we do shape the debate on climate change. And I'll give you a few examples of this. Together with the Employers' Confederation, we in LO Norway have developed a common energy and industrial policy strategy that has identified several areas for economic growth and industrial development, based on the expertise and competitive advantage of the oil sector. And it is focused, among others, on building supply chains and technology for battery production, wind energy, blue and green hydrogen, and carbon capturing and storage. Already we have achieved broad political support, and it has defined Norway's strategy for greening the economy and also reducing our dependency on the oil and gas sector. And another example is the Just Transition Council, which was established this year as an outcome of the COP in Glasgow last year. Trade unions, employers' organizations, and representatives of the government come together to negotiate large-scale structural transformations in the world of work on a national level, responding to climate change. So these are just two examples from what we have achieved so far in my home countries. Strategies and pathways will differ within different countries, while the goals remain the same: safe jobs in a sustainable future. So what the trade union movement cannot accept is that economic and environmental crises continue to increase the inequalities in society. We have to avoid that employers are making plans without the unions. So we demand a say. And we need to plan now for pathways that will keep today's good jobs and also create new ones while bringing down emissions. Governments need to put actions behind their words, and we need new policies with higher ambitions developed in collaboration with the unions. If not, this transformation is going to be another drift towards increasing inequalities. We have a lot in common in the union movement, and while we may differ on strategies, we all believe in international solidarity and collaboration. And this report, Sam, that you will show us more from today is an example of how to work together and how to find solutions.
Thank you so much, Peggy. And also, let's give Peggy some applause here. And Peggy, also a heartfelt thanks from me and from ITUC to LO Norway as the co-host of the Just Transition Center. We have learned a lot from working closely with LO Norway.
Thank you, Sam. We are very happy to be housing you in Oslo.
Yes, thank you. So now, Atne, I'd like to turn to you, because of course Industrial and your affiliates, you've been a key part of this collaboration between national centers and energy unions around the world. So Atne, what are your reflections from this process?
Well, it's been a very interesting process. I think we've learned a lot. There's been seminars on different energy types. There have been seminars in regions on how to develop this. And we always say there's time for talk and there's time for action. And now we've had 1 year of this project where there has been a lot of talking, and now it's time to get down to action. And we're producing recommendations from the process. So I'm going to outline a few of them for you, so to see where we hope we're going and hopefully get support for that. First of all, we think that we need to engage the big energy companies, the multinational energy companies in the world. You know, as global unions, we've been dealing with multinational companies through global framework agreements, getting them to respect trade union rights around the world in their supply chains and in their own production, of course. And we should be looking now at creating something similar called just transition agreements between trade unions and the multinational companies. And also these agreements will have to deal with supply chains, because we know that most of the work is going to happen in supply chains, and we know that the further down in supply chain you get, the worse are the working conditions, wages, health and safety conditions, and so on. So we really need to hold these corporations responsible in their complete supply chains. It needs to be based on the UN guiding principles, internationally recognized standards. And of course, we need to take into consideration all the new national legislation coming up on due diligence, also hopefully a European directive soon, and if we're lucky and good at our work, when we get an international binding treaty through the UN. That has to be in these just transition agreements. And of course, finally, we have to make sure that the agreements are gender transformative, so that we take into consideration the need for gender equity, both in creating the job, developing the transition, and finalizing the process. And then besides that, we need to develop institutionalized social dialogue on just transition in all countries in the world. We know the transition is coming. We've heard from Sharon and Peggy, and we have to prepare for that, and governments have to prepare together with us. We always say we have to be at the table, but we really have to. That's the only way a transition can be just, because if governments are going to sit in their chambers creating a transition without us, they will never create a transition that works. It is not possible, because they don't really have the on-ground experience of what needs to be done. So we need to work together with governments to institutionalize social dialogue on this, anticipate the changes that will come. That is everything from which jobs will disappear, what kind of jobs do we need to create, what do we have to do in regions that are particularly hit by transition, and how can we finance it? All of this has to come preferably before the transition happens, because we need to be prepared. And as we say in Industry All, everybody that has a good job today needs to know that there is a good job and a good place for them on the other side of the transition. If not, you won't get people along on the transition, and then it will break down. So we need to really work with governments, but governments need to take the initiative here. They need to set up just transition structures and social dialogue platforms for just transitions in their countries, so that we can have this discussion. It's already too late, but it's not far too late. So it has to happen now. And then, of course, it is imperative that we all engage in the processes. We cannot have a situation where this is a debate going on in the rich north. We have to empower the unions all around the world to be able to take up this challenge, deal with the governments, and put pressure on them to put this process into place.
Thank you so much, General Secretary. Thank you, Atle. And indeed, that was one experience from this process, and that is that our affiliates, our unions, our brothers and sisters and comrades all around the world are deeply interested in this issue and ready to work on it. But we have to take the initiative. If we sit and wait, the governments and employers will make their own plans without us. So thank you very much for your reflections. We'd now like to take a few comments from the floor. We've got some previously identified speakers. I would like to call David Acuna up to the floor from CUT Chile. David, the president of CUT Chile, if you could come up to the mic that's nearest from you, we'd love to hear from you about your experiences in Chile with just transition. Thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias por la invitación. Yo traía una presentación sobre minerales raros, o críticos, entonces por eso, bueno, pero no importa, vamos a hablar de transición justa. ¿Cómo está viviendo hoy día Chile un proceso de cambio de matriz energética? Pero lamentablemente en Chile tenemos un problema con la ministra de Energía, del Medio Ambiente. Ella ha planteado, incluso ahora en la COP27, que la palabra no es transición justa, es transición socioecológica justa. Entonces nosotros como trabajadores hemos planteado que efectivamente eso no es transición justa. Transición justa es un concepto, como bien lo decía Sharon hace un en sus primeras intervenciones, es un concepto que se ha defendido por más de 15 años por parte de las organizaciones sindicales, lo cual creemos que es fundamental poder avanzar de la mano. En Chile, lo que nos está pasando es cambiar de las plantas de carbón a las plantas de energía más renovable, como energía eólica o paneles fotovoltaicos, donde efectivamente hoy ahí tenemos estos grandes desafíos. Tenemos zonas de sacrificio, como lo es Quintero, Puchuncaví, el Cordón, que efectivamente ha existido una contaminación constante por parte de las empresas también transnacionales. Lamentablemente vivimos en una contradicción, que es la contradicción de trabajo versus medio ambiente. Creemos fuertemente en la protección del medio ambiente, pero también necesitamos generar trabajo. Entonces, en estos procesos de transición, y aquí quiero plantear una pregunta, en estos procesos de transición, ¿cómo enfrentamos efectivamente estas contradicciones que también se nos generan? Porque hablaba anteriormente una compañera de Alemania que nos planteaba que el cambio también de la matriz energética, pero también hemos sabido que están retrocediendo por el tema de la guerra, están abriendo nuevamente plantas de carbón. Entonces, ¿cómo efectivamente transitamos o realizamos estas transiciones con los trabajadores de la mano? Porque efectivamente somos los que necesitamos todo este proceso de cambio. Muchas gracias.
Yeah, so who would like to start from our panel and answer David's question? Maybe Atle, you start.
Okay. Well, first of all, you're completely right. As I said, and as you say again, workers have to be at the table when the discussion starts. If not, there will be no real transition. I think that we need to work on several axes, but we really need to empower our affiliates. They need to understand what just transition can be for them. I think we realize there is a contradiction, but we also realize that we all recognize the climate panel and the conclusions from the climate panel. If we don't do anything, we will eventually get a dead planet, and nobody wants a dead planet. So, I mean, with that as a baseline, we have no choice. We have to get in. There will come a transition, and the sooner we get to the table and discuss the transition, discuss the modalities of the transition, discuss the financing of the transition, the better the result will be for us. So, I mean, the easy answer is we have no choice. We just have to get ready.
Fair enough. Sharon, how would you like to respond to David's question?
Well, I think it's everything. I mean, if you can't actually bring workers with you, then we're going to fail. I mean, Peggy said that, Atle said that. And that doesn't mean we'll get every single worker standing right where we want them to be, but it does mean, and I think we've learned this, Sam, that we have to give them an encouragement that they can be part of the process, but also that there's a plan, there are options. And you did that during the seminars because you showed them the technology, pros and cons, that could actually be deployed and what it meant and what it potentially meant and where the downsides were. So people feel empowered by that. But I also think that if we're going to give people that guarantee, it's what Siobhan said earlier, we now have to think, well, not only what's the technology, not only how do we actually communicate, give our people capacity training, whatever it takes, but we have to demand the statutory or legislative places where workers know that their unions at least are at the table and that the unions are consulting with them. Because I think without a voice, then we're at the point now where, you know, where there are good projects like the clean steel, workers are involved. Where there's hydrogen capacity in the mines, I saw it at COP, there were workers talking to their employers about, you know, the opportunities for jobs. But where you have uncertainty, if you don't at least have some sort of statutory process that, as Atle said, allows the dialogue which might actually grow into agreements, then we're not going to take that, it's a quantitative rather than a qualitative step forward, but that big leap that says, let's get this done.
So thanks, Sharon. And that's exactly what the ILO guidelines on just transition say, that there's no just transition without this backbone of social dialogue. So Peggy, you get the last word, every trade unionist's favorite thing. So please.
Well, I think it's important to point out that this transition can also create possibilities. And if we are at the table, we can both give hope to our members, but we can also demand, as Sharon says, that in this transition there are plans for education, that there are plans for future greener, sustainable workplaces, that our members in today's industries that we know will have to be phased out, as Atle is saying, but they have a possibility in the new jobs to come. So I think that's very important. And I would also like to recognize what our brother says here, that this has slowed down because of the war in Ukraine. That's what we're all afraid of. So I think it's important for us to, as unions, also to not allow that to happen, but to remind our politicians that we have to have several thoughts at the same time. We cannot slow down, even though there is an energy crisis at the moment. It's even more important to build new green industries in the future.
Thank you, Peggy, for those inspiring words. Let's give Peggy a big hand of applause. I'd like to thank our panelists. They're going to make their way off the stage. We'll have a couple more interventions from the floor. The first one, I'd like to welcome Sister Jyoti Makwan, who is the General Secretary of SEWA. And Jyoti, you're going to talk to us about experiences of just transition and waste. We'll have one more intervention. No, we have a few more interventions, and then we'll go to the maritime sector. But please, Jyoti.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to share the experience of working with the climate warrior in the urban cities, and that is the waste recyclers. 1% of the urban population in the urban cities of the developing country are engaged in the activity related to waste collection, segregation, and disposable, and are known as waste recyclers. Most of the waste recyclers are women and self-employed, belonging to the lower strata of the society. Waste recyclers pick all kinds of waste from the dump sites and from the roadside, which includes waste papers, torn shoes, broken glass, wood pieces, thin polythene, plastic bags, electronic waste, plastic to bones, and even human hair. Then they segregate this waste and sell it to scrap shop owners. Thus, the waste cyclers, women play a vital role in the society. She keeps the surrounding clean and healthy and supports recycling in a huge manner. This way, she is able to earn and support her family. Yet, we cannot ignore their contribution in the mitigation of adverse effects of climate change. SEWA's involvement with waste recyclers began in 1975. We adopted the approach of struggle and development, struggle in sense of organizing them and increasing their collective strength to fight for their rights. Development by building their cooperatives to link them with decent livelihoods. Today, the membership of waste recyclers is more than 32,000. SEWA promoted the municipal authorities to ensure inclusion of the traditional waste recyclers in the door-to-door waste collection system, collection of dry category of waste at no cost from government offices, and so on. After much effort, SEWA initiated cooperative of the waste recyclers were given 30,000 households to initiate this system of door-to-door waste collection in one city, that is Ahmedabad. With proper training to the waste recyclers as well as household segregated waste at the sources was collected and sent either to recycling units or municipal dump sites. These enabled to reduce the waste at the dump site up to 60 to 70%, a huge contribution of the informal sectors on the climate change measures. While the waste recyclers had stable and decent income, their living standards were enhanced and the social status was also improved. They were able to eat nutritious food and send their children to the schools. But this also initiated another struggle. The multinational companies came in and they saw business and profit in it, and so they have taken that tender and now they are doing, so the waste pickers have lost their work. Meanwhile, we continued our social dialogues that the role of waste recyclers in keeping our environment clean and mitigating climate change would be recognized, and their livelihood should be enhanced and ensured by including them in all the levels of solid waste management of the city. Almost 4,100 metric ton of solid waste is generated from Ahmedabad city on a daily basis. On an average, the informal sector waste recyclers are able to handle 30 to 40% of the waste at different levels. There are twofold benefits here. The supply chain of scrap traders is eliminated, resulting to better incomes and reduced exploitation for the waste recyclers. And secondly, it contributes enormously to the environment mitigation that affects the climate change. At the end, I just would like to say two things. One is, how do we really recognize the role of these waste recyclers towards mitigation of the climate, the effect of the climate change? And I think they need even if they are doing this work, they need a lot of technologies, trainings in terms of to adopt it and make their work more decent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Jyoti. And also thanks for your work on behalf of the informal women workers of India. Indeed, the waste sector is a huge source of emissions, and the work of these informal workers of the waste pickers is extremely important in fighting climate change. So thank you very much. Okay, I would now like to call Lisette Risgaard, the president of FH of Denmark, to make an intervention from the floor. Lisette, we are eager to hear about Denmark's just transition and your green transition.
Thank you, and I would also like to thank both Sharon, Peggy, and Atle, who has a little bit of, coffee and someplace. It has been just interesting to learn about your initiative on just transition in the energy sector, and this is actually where unions can push for a change. By coming together across the regions and sectors to see how we on a global level can lay the path for a transition towards a sustainable future. I would like to share with you how we in Denmark are working towards a transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And while we never had the same amount of oil as in our neighbor country, Norway, we did still have a big supply in the North Sea. There we are able to rely on oil as energy supply for many years. But since the 1970s, Denmark has been a leader in the development of wind energy. Our proximity to the ocean has made it possible for Danish companies to invest heavily in offshore wind. But in order to choose investments to pay off, we have also had to invest in recycling and upscaling workers, or allowing workers in the oil industry to shift to the offshore wind sector. In the years to come, we also need to speed up this transition even more. And the Danish Parliament has decided that all domestic production of oil and gas will cease by 2050. The Parliament has also adopted the climate law with the goal of reducing our carbon emission by 70% in 2030. These are very ambitious goals and require actions if we have to succeed. And it's an ongoing transition that will continue to require investment, both manpower and equipment. From a trade union perspective, our ambition is to ensure that the transition will get everyone on board. We want to use this as an opportunity to push for initiatives that will secure more skilled workers. We are convinced that Denmark will only succeed in reaching our ambition targets if we get more skilled workers. They are crucial to both the development in the manufacturing of the technology needed. We are also need more young people, those who choose vocational education and training. So we call heavily on investment in vocational education and training so it becomes an attractive career for young people. And at the same time, we need to reskill and upskill adult workers so they can have the right match of skills. So it would very much be a pleasure to end my intervention by asking three things of Sharon, Peggy, and Natalie. How do they see why we, or how we as unions can push our governments to invest in skilled and people that are needed for the just transition? So thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisetta. And unfortunately, parts of our panel had to leave because they're coinciding with the General Council meeting. But I think this is a critical demand, right? How do we make sure that our members and people who should be our members don't fear transition, but they see a new job on the other side of it for them, a good job, and that they have the skills and training in order to get those good new jobs and to thrive in them. So I think we can discuss this in the margins, and we can also maybe get a very lively discussion about the transition out of fossil fuels in Denmark between yourselves and the Norwegian unions, not to start an international incident here. I'd now like to call Amal Engamri, who's the Deputy General Secretary of UMT, to the mic. Amal, the floor is yours. There you are.
Oui, bonjour, et je vous remercie pour l'invitation. Écoutez, nous vivons, le Maroc est très vulnérable au changement climatique. Il est dans une zone de haute vulnérabilité. Il est touché par le stress hydrique, puisqu'il se rapproche donc du seuil critique fixé à 500 mètres cubes. Donc, nous connaissons des sécheresses récurrentes qui ont des impacts sur les populations et puis sur la sécurité alimentaire. Cela risque de réduire notre PIB dans l'avenir de 6,5%. D'où donc la nécessité de trouver des solutions pour contrecarrer donc, les effets néfastes de la sécheresse sur nos agriculteurs d'abord. À ce sujet, à l'UMT, notre fédération syndicale de l'agriculture a essayé, a organisé un congrès constitutif du syndicat national des paysans pour leur apprendre, pour les former à aller vers une agriculture résiliente. Et avec ça, donc, nous organisons des alliances avec des coopératives, et des coopératives et puis des ONG qui s'intéressent aussi au rural. Vous savez, le Maroc risque par exemple d'avoir 1,9 million de sa population rurale aller émigrer, enfin pas émigrer, mais aller vers les zones rurales, vers les zones urbaines. Donc ce sera le chômage, d'où donc la nécessité de former ces gens-là à des métiers d'artisanat, etc., pour pouvoir les fixer là où ils sont et leur donner des possibilités d'emploi qui développeraient donc leur résilience à ce changement climatique. Pour parler des inondations, il y a eu également beaucoup d'inondations ces dernières années. Je cite pour exemple l'année dernière une inondation cette fois-ci qui a impacté même des usines à l'intérieur des villes, telles qu'une usine à Tanger, où 24 personnes ont trouvé la mort. Et on a alerté, on a contesté, on a interpellé le gouvernement donc, pour qu'il aille vers la prévention des catastrophes naturelles en ce sens et pour augmenter donc, la sécurité, l'hygiène et sécurité dans nos usines pour que les travailleurs et les travailleuses travaillent donc, dans des espaces sécurisés. Pour le secteur, maintenant, un autre secteur où le Maroc a une longueur d'avance, c'est bien sûr la transition énergétique et l'efficacité énergétique. Vous savez, le Maroc a l'ambition de réduire donc, ces gaz à effet de serre et d'avoir un mix énergétique de 52% d'ici 2030. C'est bon, mais nous justement, dans tout ça, notre préoccupation, c'est comment, justement, tout en intégrant cet élan de décarbonisation et d'énergie propre, comment aller vers des emplois propres, décents, qui correspondent donc à toutes disons, qui accomplissent tous les critères du travail décent. Ce changement-là, il a déjà commencé et il y a un phénomène de transformation de beaucoup d'entreprises chez nous où nous demandons donc de la formation pour justement la formation des ressources humaines, de nos militants également, pour qu'ils puissent appréhender cette transition tout en sauvegardant leurs emplois ou en trouvant d'autres emplois. Nous savons que ça se fait par le biais d'une destruction, comme l'a bien prévu Schumpeter, une destruction créatrice, mais nous sommes confiants parce que nous pourrons créer des emplois verts, des emplois, comme je disais tout à l'heure, qui ont de la durabilité et en même temps qui satisfont aux critères du travail décent. Donc pour nous, c'est une occasion, c'est une opportunité d'aller vers plus de protection sociale, plus de respect de droits fondamentaux dans les nouveaux emplois qui vont avoir lieu. Concernant donc comment on s'y prépare par rapport aux multinationales, par exemple, vous savez, beaucoup de travailleurs de multinationales sont syndiqués chez nous, dans l'automobile, dans les énergies même. Alors nous essayons de pousser nos camarades pour qu'ils soient acteurs dans cette transition, en négociant avec leurs employeurs au niveau des comités d'entreprise. Grâce à Industriol, par exemple, nous avons maintenant dans certaines multinationales des comités d'entreprise mondiaux où nos camarades sont partie prenante. Nous essayons au niveau des comités locaux également d'avoir voix au chapitre et de négocier des conditions sécures, des conditions de travail, de travail décent au sein de ces entreprises, d'aller vers plus de formation pour que justement orienter nos cadres, pour orienter les employés sur d'autres secteurs et quand il faut changer d'emploi, aider également les gens qui partent des entreprises à avoir leur propre travail, à avoir leur propre business quand il le faut et partir dans des conditions dignes. Voilà, nous sommes complètement intégrés, nous sommes partie prenante dans tout ça. C'est vrai qu'on n'est pas invité partout par le gouvernement, mais nous nous imposons et nous essayons autant qu'on peut d'impulser et de travailler pour qu'il y ait cette transition juste, réussie pour les travailleurs dans notre pays. Merci.
Thank you very much, and especially both for reminding us about the impacts of climate change on our members and other workers, on the agricultural sector, but also even on the industrial sector because of the effects of extreme weather events on us all. So thank you very much, Amir. I'd now like to call Takayuki Yagi, who's the Assistant General Secretary at Rengo. Yagi-san, please.
Hi, brothers and sisters. Let me talk about the just transition issues in Japan. First of all, Rengo has been advocating the need for a fair transition throughout our annual policy dialogue with the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industries, and throughout the Government Council. In this August, Prime Minister kicked off a special council named GX Implementation Council. That means Green Transition Implementation Council, and Rengo's president, Tomoko Yoshino, participated in this council as one of the 13 members. At this conference, a roadmap for the next 10 years towards the Japanese decarbonization is deeply discussed. This roadmap starts with how to overcome the energy crisis situation. And this roadmap includes investment and promotions for decarbonization, utilization of finance and carbonization pricing, and international deployment of decarbonization. Government and the business communities try to balance the decarbonizations and growth. However, technology and innovation is not the silver bullet for the economic and social growth, we think. We insist that it is human capital that realizes the innovations. At the GX Council, the ITUC affirmed that economic and social growth will not come through unless government creates green and direct jobs, decent jobs, and achieve a fair transition. On the other hand, during the strategic conversations with the government about the fair transition, we find out some challenges. The first challenge is in Japan, the Labor Administration has no involvement in climate change measures. Despite repeated requests from Rengo, not only the government has not involved the Labor Administration in climate change measures, but also the Labor Administration does not have portfolio covering a fair transition yet. Therefore, in Japan, fair transition is only described as a vocabulary in the government's document, but dialogue and concrete measures about the goal and specific measures related to the employment have not yet been implemented. Under such situations, let us strongly cheer up the ITUC activities for the navigating us to global decision-making. In order to realize fair transition in all countries and in order to resolve cross-sectional issues, we support ITUC to continue request the commitment of labor administrations to climate change issues in discussions on global level agreements. Also, ITUC promote efforts for social dialogue on just transition by social partners, including the three parties, government, labor, and management in each country. We strongly support these activities because we need it. In second challenge is to secure the financial resource to attract further investment for the decarbonizations and to implement necessary climate change measures. A great amount of money is needed to realize a fair transition, and the government thinks that they are going to have a new levy, a kind of tax. However, depending on how it is applied, a tax or levy has a significant impact on various industries and also on people's daily life. Therefore, we insist that the government should proceed with caution, listening to the voice of workers who support the industries. We hope that ITUC's Just Transition Center, which have been introduced many good examples of initiatives to various countries, will continue to collect and actively disseminate the information about the fair transitions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yagi-san. We will, we promise. So I'd now like to welcome our brother Steve Cotton, the General Secretary of the International Transport Workers Federation, to the stage. Steve, come on up. We're excited to hear about the Just Transition Maritime Task Force, but also just to recognize ITF as another part of our movement that has come very far and very fast on the issue of just transition, always with the interests of workers and members at the front of its concerns. So Steve, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Sam, and good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to say the climate crisis is here now. Transport workers, whether they work on buses in extreme temperatures, whether they work in civil aviation, confronted by renewed levels of dangerous turbulence, and our seafarers that have to deal with these incredible storms that we see. It's a reality. And as Sam said, for us, similar to many of our colleagues, it's all about what do the workers believe and what do they see and how can they influence this process. Sam mentioned the ITF has been at the forefront of trying to develop sustainable transport policies. But we have to be frank, it hasn't always been easy.
Many of our members have challenged the conversation in our sections and our executive board, but in the last Congress in 2018, we understood that the time is now and we have to act in a way that protects our members. But what is a just transition in transportation? It's critical that the workers are not intimidated by the subject, understand what a green job might be, and are in a position to have an influence. It's critical, whether you're a cabin crew, whether you work in a ship, or you're in a port with infrastructure that's being hammered, that you're able to understand the risks and the challenges. So what are we doing? Well, we have a vision. First, we have to have a vision about how we're going to make a difference. And we recognize transportation is part of the public good. But public transport in particular is an area where we've been working incredibly hard. Sam said it. We had to look at ourselves, reevaluate what we were doing, and we've participated with big representations in the last 2 COPs. Last week, we issued an initiative around maritime just transition. This is in partnership with the International Chamber of Shipping, so this is an opportunity for us to consolidate social dialogue, and our numbers suggest 800,000 seafarers have to be retrained to be fit for the new fuels. We issued a 10-point plan, which is all about ensuring that that training is funded not by workers, but from the process. We also issued a report on sustainable transport in Africa, and we recognize how do we deal with the injustices and the imbalances when it comes to remedies and solutions. But also it's an issue of workers' health and safety. It would be wrong of us not to thank Sam and the team for the work that we've done with the C40. This is a group of the world's most influential mayors. We launched the Future is Public Transport initiative in 2021. This is a partnership between us and these mayors. We recognize that the initial call of 210 billion is critical to transition public transport from carbon-based fuels into green fuels. And we're continuing to look at work in a number of cities, London, Jakarta, Milan, Johannesburg, and Houston, about how do we make good quality jobs, jobs that we can defend in our environment. It's critical that we're in a position to set an agenda. We will be looking between now and the next COP in UAE about what do we do about civil aviation and alternative fuels. But in conclusion, I think it's critical that we recognize that, yes, we got what I believe was a very strong resolution from COP, which I think ran on and only finished yesterday. But it's also critical that we, as the labour movement, recognize the investment needed in all sectors, not just transport. And as we heard from our colleagues in industrial, the energy companies, our friends from Norway, we are ready to work together to look at ways we can hold and use the UN bodies or the Global Compact or whoever we need to partner with to ensure that workers' voices and visions are at the top of the table. And then we can communicate right back to the workplace what needs to be done and what needs to be done in a way to ensure that workers are not intimidated by the challenges and the new skills, but are actually funded and professionally and safe in their workplaces to ensure that we can give them good, long-term, secure union jobs. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Steve. Perfect ending, good, secure, and long-term union jobs. That's what we want in the just transition. So, Steve, you're free to go. You're a free man. Thank you so much, as always. And I'd like to ask the last 2 speakers for this segment to come on up. So I'd like to welcome Christopher Jonsson from LO Sweden, who's also the chair of the Committee on Workers' Capital, and Scott Connolly, Assistant General Secretary at the Australian Council of Trade Unions. So we're going to cover one more sector in this marathon session, and that sector is investment, because workers' capital is ours. It's part of our deferred wages in the form of pensions. we're going to hear a little bit about the work that the Committee on Workers' Capital is doing. Please, gentlemen, brothers.
So, Committee on Workers' Capital was founded 20 plus years ago with the mission statement to secure and safeguard that workers' capital is invested in a way which is in line with workers' interest. According to OECD, workers' pension plan amounts to $35 trillion US. That is a significant amount of money. And with that amount of money comes amount of power, if coordinated correctly. CVC has 700 participants from 25 different countries, which engage with global asset managers to put pressure on companies which have acted against workers' rights or even the fundamental right of freedom of association. CWC does also engage directly with companies through supporting trustees in exercising their shareholder rights, such as shareholder resolution and proxy voting. One needs to take into account that workers' capital is deployed on financial markets globally, hence subject to financial markets volatility. Just transition isn't helped when we have politicians like Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng, who try to cut taxes for the richest 10% in UK, finance it through printing new money when we are in a situation when the inflation hits its 40th high. That kind of stupidity is limited.
I think we could clap for that, actually. What do you think?
Thanks. And I guess that Bank of England also agrees with me because they have to step in and secure the financial stability. And for those who say that inflation is transitory, well, the ISH was also transitory. It's my honor and privilege to present you our next speaker, who has successfully navigated us through these rough waters, Scott Conley.
Great, thanks. Thanks everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you briefly this afternoon. I'd just like to acknowledge, of course, the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I think really this conversation is a challenge for us about are we going to be part of the problem here or part of the solution in terms of what happens to our money, workers' money across the globe. And I think overwhelmingly, unfortunately, the trajectory of how capital is being deployed in markets in terms of just transition and climate transition is one that suggests to date that it is still a problem and it's still something that we need to critically turn the tide against and start ensuring that it's used to solve this problem more than it is currently. So that's really the core of the work of the Committee of Workers' Capital, about how do we leverage the huge capital pools of workers' savings across the globe to make a difference for working people in their working lives today, of course with an eye to ensuring that they have dignity in their retirements as well. But we know that the vast bulk of investment funds across the globe is workers' money. There's trillions of dollars sitting in these capital pools, be it in pension funds, super funds in this country, sovereign wealth funds. We have that money invested on our behalf globally, and we sort of see through the committee that as custodians of that capital, these pension funds, asset managers have a direct responsibility to working people, and we need to reach into their world and the world of capital markets and financial markets to ensure that they're exercising their decisions with an eye to absolutely the interests of workers and working people. And where we're trustees directly, that we have a direct responsibility to discharge that responsibility in terms of the funds that we govern, and making sure that not only we're making the right decisions, but we are holding both ourselves and those that are managing money on behalf of workers to account for the decisions that they make. So we know absolutely that capital has to be held to account for the decisions that they're making for the beneficiaries, and that's working people across the globe, and that's through action, engagement, and the pressure that's been mentioned, that we can make the difference that's required and ensure that workers' rights are upheld and that we're making a real difference to the world and the challenges that it's facing. And a real example of this is the work that we've done here in Australia through the work of the Committee of Workers' Capital, holding one of our investment managers, IFM Investors, to account for its investments in port infrastructure assets across this country, where through the work of the ITUC we were able to reach a memorandum of understanding and clear explicit commitments from IFM that they would uphold the rights of labour on their assets, to respect the rights, the ultimate dignity and their rights to organise and bargain and be members of unions in those workplaces. From that step and that initiative, our ambition, of course, is to, one, hold IFM to account for the commitments it's made, and we equally want to work with the ITUC and the CWC to broaden that commitment into IFM's assets across the globe, not only their port assets, but their airport assets, both in this country and globally. So we know that these are massive challenges, but we equally know that the opportunities that are present from these capital pools are so significant and so urgent that we mobilise our investments and our retirement saving pools to make the difference that's required for working people globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Scott and Christopher. Doing our work in the halls of capital, we appreciate you. We have a little time before our next segment, so if anyone has a burning question for the brothers on stage or a comment you make, mic is open. No, you'd like to go straight to the next point. Okay, thank you very much, brothers.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to wrap up now. I know it's been a pretty hectic week, pretty hectic few days. So this wrap up includes a couple of messages from two union brothers, two union comrades. The first of whom is Thomas Mayo, who is an activist, but also a trade unionist in the Maritime Unions of Australia. We're going to see a video greeting from him, and then a video greeting from our own Edwin Palma, who was the president of Ecopetrol in Colombia and is now the vice minister for employment relations in the new government of Colombia. So let's see these video greetings, then we're gonna have a little voting exercise that I'll tell you about, and then we'll wrap up. Thanks.
My name is Thomas Mayo. I'm a Wharfie, proud member of the Maritime Union of Australia, and I'm an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander man for this country. So I pay my respects to the traditional owners, as we always do in the union movement here in this country. I come from Darwin, or Larrakia country in the tropical north, and my people in the Torres Strait are facing the climate crisis and possibly being the first climate refugees in this country. The union movement has really helped me find my voice. I was a quiet young man working on the wharves, and the union taught me how to organise, to build power, and I've used that to now campaign for my own people. In this country, we're fighting for constitutional change, to change the Constitution of Australia so that Indigenous voices are always heard. This is something that we must do in the union movement globally as well. We should listen to Indigenous people, we should act with Indigenous people, and that is the best way for us to give justice to Indigenous people, but justice for all, and also climate justice, because Indigenous people hold the knowledges that can help us build a more sustainable future and to act and adapt in the climate crisis. So please, make it our business, all unions of the world, to support Indigenous people, listen to them, and walk with them. Thank you.
Quiero comenzar este mensaje repitiendo las palabras finales de nuestro presidente Gustavo Petro en la Asamblea General de la ONU. Solo en paz podremos salvar la vida en esta nuestra tierra común. No hay paz total sin justicia social, económica y ambiental. Estamos en guerra también con el planeta. Sin paz con el planeta no habrá paz entre las naciones. Sin justicia no hay paz social. Nuestro gobierno pone en primer lugar de la agenda la paz total en Colombia. Parar ya la guerra entre las naciones. Estamos tarde para enfrentar la amenaza principal de toda la humanidad, la desaparición, si no resolvemos la crisis climática. La invasión de Ucrania profundizó la crisis climática, social y económica. En Colombia, algunos se alegran por el aumento de precios y volumen de venta de petróleo y carbón, mientras que nosotros, como importadores masivos de alimentos básicos, los precios de los alimentos han subido al menos un 30% este año. Hoy más de la mitad de nuestra población padece hambre. Mientras tanto, lo poco que se había avanzado en transición energética se pierde. Avanza el fracking, se vuelve a buscar gas en el Mar del Norte, se reabren plantas nucleares y térmicas. La agresión a Ucrania es una tragedia global en la que además se ha abierto otra ventana al fascismo y la amenaza nuclear. Nuestro llamado urgente es a la paz. Desde el tiempo en que tuve el honor de presidir la Unión Sindical Obrera, junto a los compañeros y compañeras de Sintracarbón y Sintralecol, acordamos unos principios básicos para la transición energética justa. Primero, una política pública nacional de transición justa concertada. Dos, que esa política sea abanderada por empresas y entidades del Estado. Tercero, que los avances en transición energética fortalezcan el trabajo decente, la inclusión y participe a las organizaciones sindicales. Cuarto, incluir en la negociación colectiva planes de transición y reconversión laboral. Hoy, ahora desde el gobierno, seguimos compartiendo estos principios y reafirmamos nuestro compromiso de avanzar en un proceso de transición energética justa, planeado, concertado, inclusivo, democrático, con diálogo social. Además, como lo afirmó el presidente Petro en la ONU, lograr que, por ejemplo, se cambie deuda externa por acciones que salven la selva amazónica dependerá de la fortaleza de las alianzas entre gobiernos del sur, pero también de los movimientos sociales. En especial quiero invitar al sindicalismo del sur a que se encuentre y avance en una agenda continental de cambio real y movilización con más unidad. Un abrazo a todas y a todos.
So that was an inspiring message also to all of our comrades across Latin America to unite, to work on this common agenda of peace, justice, and just transition. I'd now like to introduce a little voting exercise. So we have two questions in front of us, and you should have a card. One side is red, meaning no, and the other side is green, meaning yes. So for this first question, are your members affected by the climate crisis? What do we think? Is the answer yes? Yes. I see a lot of green cards. And I think I know the answer to the second question, which is whether your union, your federation, has started work on climate and just transition. I can certainly say yes on behalf of the Just Transition Center. And I'm seeing mostly green cards around this room. So thank you very much for affirming that we are united as a movement in our work on climate and just transition. So, comrades, this has been, as we all know, a hectic few days. I want to thank you for hanging in there and participating throughout this forum. We appreciate you. We appreciate all the work that you and your members do on these issues. And the Just Transition Center, our colleagues at ITUC, we are all ready to support you in this common effort. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the reception this evening, and we will see you there. Thanks again. Bye-bye.